Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with our usual co-host, PFF fantasy analyst Jeff Ratcliffe, and Marianne Lee. We are on the 7-Eleven edition tonight, so get your Slurpees ready, and we'll just jump right in. So I think what we wanted to do first, ladies and gentlemen, is get to some injury updates. Thomas Rawls, Tyler Eifert, and then we will have a very spirited debate on who the top fantasy running back should be. But first up, a quick Tyler Eifert update. Nothing really new, more confirming that he could possibly be out the first couple games of the season. I don't know. Are you guys concerned at all about this for his fantasy value, or where are you taking him?
Well, you have to be concerned about a guy who relies on touchdowns for production, and anytime anyone misses that kind of time, you're nervous, and you don't see at all how they're doing as far as, with the team, with the quarterback, what have you. But, he was out the whole season before, and then he came back and rocked it. They clearly want to lean on him. I think you can kind of get a bargain for him if you can make it through a couple weeks. I don't think his usage will go down that much, and I think we're relying on some very inflated numbers at the tight end position last year. You don't normally have that many tight ends that get that kind of production. So, I would be someone that if I took Tyler Eifert, then you just wait it out and get the guy I'm getting everywhere I can, which is Zach Miller, and I feel fine about starting him until I can get Eifert back and maybe even beyond.
Yeah, you bring it up, though, and the production is really concerning because, we've talked about this how many times on the show and through articles. I wrote about it today. 66 targets, 13 touchdowns. That just isn't production that is sustainable by any means. And then on top of it, you get the word that it's pretty much clarity. He's going to miss some games this season. So we've seen him in the past. Eifert is a guy who doesn't necessarily heal very quickly, and he's still going incredibly early. Now, keep in mind, anybody who's drafting right now is a complete lunatic like us, but as we get closer to August, that ADP is going to creep back. So the question ultimately becomes, when does he become a value, right? Because we're all about value, and if you're drafting him as the sixth tight end off the board, that's not value. If you're drafting him as the 14th tight end off the board, now all of a sudden that is value, because when he returns, he has shown that he does have top six fantasy tight end upside. So it's going to be a careful balance, but I agree with Brandon. I agree with your take. You can get guys later on. I'm taking shots on 3 upside guys. Now, one of them, by the time the draft season rolls around, he's not going to be a value, and of course, that's Kobe Fleener. But Ladarius Green, his ADP sort of, I like that in that 8-9 range among tight ends, and people keep overlooking Zach Ertz as the 10th tight end off the board, who we expect to see some positive touchdown regression from. Just 2 touchdowns despite triple-digit targets last year. So I like doing that. If you can get Tyler Eifert in the last couple rounds of your draft, if he really falls that far, then it makes sense. Otherwise, for me, I just think he's going to be overdrafted this year, and the injury concerns, obviously. And by the way, 7-Eleven, Michael, no Chris Hogan shout-out whatsoever on the 7-Eleven always open day?
No, I leave that to you, Jeff. You're the Chris Hogan expert.
Is that me? That's what it says on my business card.
Right.
I'm the big downer on Chris Hogan, so I'm ignoring you guys. I'm the Debbie Downer of all the Patriots this year. I'm like, unless Tom Brady's not suspended for 4 games, they're all getting drafted too high.
That's probably fair, and we will get to that, I assure you. But a couple things on Eifert real quick. So is Tyler Kroft any streamer value the first part of the season, maybe for DFS or as a month-long replacement?
I think
DFS,
so.
I think DFS is a great call. Tight end's so deep. It's a position where, we always say that entering the season, then we realize it's not really as deep as we thought it was. But we did see a lot of guys top triple-digit targets last year, and some of those guys, Gary Barnidge, really topping the list. We didn't necessarily expect to be in that range, so guys are going to come out of the woodwork. We're going to see players emerge. There are younger, exciting tight ends, Clive Walford types, not Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He's going to be way overdrafted, but Eric Ebron, there are a lot of, you can get Charles Clay for a bologna sandwich in the end of a draft. So I don't know if I would really worry about streaming. I think it'll be nice for dynasty purposes because we'll get a good sense of who this Kroft kid is. But for DFS, anybody is in play for DFS and certainly in GPPs.
Yeah, especially depending on the price. I mean, he's going to be, well, it depends. If they already declared Tyler Eifert out, he might be more expensive than we want him to be, but you never know. You know, you can get those bargain basement guys, and you're like, you just have to do it. You know who's almost free? Antonio Gates. And at the beginning of the season, until he's dead, he is alive and well. And I'm telling you, until he dies, Phillip Rivers is going to target him. So get him. He is a bargain. I'm telling you. I at least at the beginning of the season, he may wear down. He's obviously one of the oldest people I've ever seen in the NFL. But the point is, he's there and he's free. You can get him whenever you want.
Okay, 2 quick things. First of all, Antonio Gates is over a year younger than me. Second of all, laugh it up.
Yeah, but you're retired, Jeff. See, you're already retired. So
I'm the oldest person that Brandon has ever seen. Second of all, the salary release for DFS is going to be early. Now, last year it was right around when camp opened, so I'd expect to see the DraftKings and FanDuel prices come out right about the same time this year. Tyler Eifert's status is still going to be very much up in the air, so you know Croft, at least his week 1 salary is probably going to be very low, but probably min salary.
Well, and another thing I found interesting is people got to remember there's, I mean, a ton of targets out there for the taking in Cincinnati. You had Marvin Jones with his 103, he's gone. Mohamed Sanu had 49 last year, he's gone. And like you mentioned, Jeff, Eifert only had, 66, 67. So there's a lot of room for growth there from whoever takes it, whether it's Croft or, I kind of like Bernard there, too, to get some more targets in place of those guys, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think he's sort of flying under the radar a little bit. He's a good early down runner, too. He's not, this isn't like, Danny Woodhead, Theo Riddick, or even Charles Sims, guys like that who aren't going to get much work on early downs. Bernard can do that, so yeah, I like him, and especially he still gets overlooked in PPR, which kind of blows my mind. So that's a really good call.
All right, enough Cincinnati action because you can only take so much in one podcast. We will move on
Pro
to
Football Focus home.
Yeah,
that's right.
Homers. Yeah, right. No, I didn't mean anything by it. Yeah, I take it back. All right.
I'll edit that one out.
The other injury update for this episode, Thomas Rawls coming back from a fractured ankle. All indications, well, at least he's self-promoting or promoting himself as completely healed, and his comeback has been phenomenal, and et cetera, et cetera. So do we take him at his word, or do we still tap on the brake on that?
I love it. I've been saying it the whole time. I've been going all in on Rawls, and I've been alone in my little island of, like, he's fine. It's not the same as Jimmy Graham. That's why they're listing them together, but it's not the same. It's not the same injury. It's not the same recovery time. Thomas Rawls is a young guy. Do I think that he's, like, the most elite talent ever and is going to be the next Marshawn Lynch? No, I do not. But I do think that they want to run the ball, and I think he's the guy. I think Procise is going to be the guy that they're going to throw to. Again, I don't know what that looks like because they've never done that with this team where there are 2 backs. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. But, yeah, I just think that sometimes we get so brokenhearted with these injuries and we just get really frozen that they can't come back. And now, I mean, I feel like Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles have made me loosey-goosey about it. I'm like, whatever, sure, they'll come back. But, yeah, I feel good about it. I think he is back. I do genuinely think that.
We did see a little bit of receiving running back play out of a lot younger than me, Fred Jackson, so it's not unprecedented. Marshawn Lynch, just a really good football player and a good receiver, though, so they didn't need to do it. So you're right, and it is going to be interesting to see how they split that up because Rawls, that is an area where he's not going to do much in that offense, but. I still have concerns, and you take a player, okay, he's at a celebrity softball event, of course, he's going to say that he feels fine and everything's great and, puppy dogs and ice cream and all that fun stuff. But the fact of the matter is that the beat writers don't anticipate him being back at the beginning of training camp. The team has been non-committal about when he's returning, even going as far, you mentioned Jimmy Graham, as saying that Jimmy Graham's going to be back before him. So that, for me, that was the alarm. Then the ultimate wake-up call, 3 running backs drafted on draft day. Rawls not drafted last year, by the way. And we're still basing this. I've been talking about this one for 3 or 4 months now, that we're basing this on 5 games of production. And I saw that my buddy Rich Rebar over at Roto World just did an article about small sample size running backs and how to kind of interpret them. So, that's getting out there now. Maybe more people are picking up on this. It's tough. It really is. And we're, we can point to examples in the past where we saw small sample size running backs who ended up panning out, who we should have paid attention to, and then small sample size running backs who didn't. So, there's no major indicator as to which one Rawls is. I agree he's exciting if he plays, but still that's more of an if for me. So I'm a little bit further down than you are, Brandon.
But I like that we don't have to take him early.
That's true.
I mean, good news is that his ADP, at least right now, is so reasonable that I can stay excited. If someone goes all in on him and, one person writes a glowing article and just the world, and I don't want that. So I'm kind of with you, too, on that. He's too small sample size. But right now I can get him and Dion Lewis so low, it's insane.
Yeah.
Well, am I the only one that would probably take Christine Michael over CJ Procise if Rawls is out? I can't see them just turning the keys over to Procise for 3 downs, right?
Well, I can't see. They're not going to do that with Christine Michael for sure. He's only going to be a down guy.
I mean, I would imagine.
What about?
I'd imagine he goes the first 2 downs, and then Procise does his thing, 3rd down, 2-minute offense, that kind of stuff.
I'm done with Christian Michael personally.
Well, but what about Alex Collins? I mean, this is a kid coming out of Arkansas who was incredibly productive there, despite the fact that he basically was in a committee with Jonathan Williams. Still went over 1,000 yards multiple times with Williams there, and Williams a nice running back too in Buffalo, but he's buried unfortunately. So I don't know. I think we can't overlook that presence there, and the fact that Christine Michael, for all the athletic ability that he has, just really still hasn't seemed to get it at the NFL level. So there is the chance that he could get passed. I mean, we all want to buy into it, but there comes a point where eventually these guys become Lee Evans, and we just should stop believing in them for fantasy purposes.
Oh, Lee Evans, wow, going way back. And let's face it, that would be the ultimate Pete Carroll move to Christine Michael to stick it to him, right? Play 2 rookies ahead of him, despite 3 being out, right? That would be so Pete Carroll. It's not even fun. Okay. All right. All right. So beyond injuries, Jeff, I know you had a note about Mike Evans in the Fantasy 5 this morning on Pro Football Focus. What do you got?
Yeah, Mike Evans, this was shocking news. He was mentally unfocused at times last year, so...
Get the breaking news, alert on the bottom there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we had to cut in, stop all broadcasts. It was fixating. It was like the OJ chase. But no, obviously that was part of the drops issue. I've talked about this before. Drops are so overrated for fantasy analysis purposes, so I'm not reading too much into that. And when you really look at it, in terms of target share. There were only 4 receivers who saw a higher share of his respective team's targets last year. Those receivers, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Brandon Marshall, DeAndre Hopkins. They finished 1, 2, 3, and 6 in standard scoring leagues. Mike Evans finished 26th with the 5th highest target share. That would suggest regression is in play for this year. And even if he doesn't get into that top 5, 6, 7, 8 conversation, with the target volume he has, he certainly could easily be a top 10 guy, and he has that top 5 upside if he puts it together. He's still a young receiver, too, and we often don't give these guys a long enough leash to really acclimate to the NFL game. So I like him to take a step forward, and the nice thing is he has that sort of target share, but you're getting him as the 11th, 12th, even maybe 13th wide receiver off the board in a lot of drafts. It depends. There are some sharps out there who are taking him as maybe the 8th or 9th receiver off the board, but I think that's pretty good value that you can get with Evans. And when you think you can go, if you're drafting in the front end of the first round, you get one of those big 3. You could probably get value at running back in the 2nd round, and then come back and get Evans in the 3rd round potentially at the tail end. That's a really good start. I know a lot of people aren't sold on him, but for me, that target volume is really appealing.
Well, and isn't it crazy that he's so young? He had 1,000 yards his rookie season when he was 21, 1,200 yards last year, and he's considered a, quote, disappointment, from what he should be. I mean, that's the crazy part, is he's doing really well. It's just the expectations were sky high going into it.
Yeah, I think the problem is, did you watch the games? You know, if you just close your eyes, you know, it looked worse than it was the problem, right? And sometimes seeing is believing, and you sit there and you say, I can't believe that he and Jameis Winston seem to just not be able to connect. But his quarterback was a rookie too. We don't take that into consideration either. This was a learning curve for both players, and so together, we're talking about the perfect storm. And if the perfect storm is still 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns, I mean, like, can you get that upset?
Right. Right. Oh, I mean, look, we're all in agreement on that one. I mean,
yeah.
He's going to be a low-end wide receiver one. I think that's probably the floor at this point.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. You know, and Brandon, you make a good point. He had a rookie quarterback who had pretty much one of the best, statistically, rookie seasons in NFL history. That, you know, again, we want it now, that immediate gratification. We want these guys to come out and you know, be Jerry Rice or Joe Montana or Walter Payton in their first years, and it's just not going to happen with a lot of these players. It takes time, and we've seen in the past that other players, you know, especially when it comes to the wide receiver position, they grow through the course of their career. You know, that's why I've talked about Des Bryant a couple different times through the last few articles that I've written, but people aren't giving him a long enough leash, and I don't get that one whatsoever. It's not like he's 34 years old. You know, Des Bryant going into his age 28 season, he's in the wheelhouse of his career. He has one down year where he's hurt and has no quarterback, and all of a sudden, now he's no longer in that elite conversation. You know, despite the fact that he was elite from 2012 to 2014. So, you know, that sort of selective vision that we have of what we want to use to evaluate these players, it kind of gets a little out of control. And Brandon, I know you agree with me here. It's getting really out of control with a bunch of different things right now. This is like we don't have anything else to do but over-exaggerate about everything.
Everything is over-exaggerated right now. Coach speak, rumors, oh, this guy is terrible. It's like, no, he's not. You know, listen, I mean, Mike Evans had 12 touchdowns his first year, and the second year, yes, it was 3, and that's why his production was but he had more yards. Like, he's still at 1,000 yards both seasons. Everyone needs to take a moment, and especially because everyone's going wide receiver early, it's weird to see Evans drop like that. It feels ominous somehow. And I always tell people this too. You know, every time I did an article actually on the site about the boring guys that are going to help your fantasy team, because the thing is that you see these guys drop and you think, is something wrong with him? And you Google him. He's not hurt. Nothing's really wrong. And I feel like Mike Evans is almost in that territory. And I think it's because people were watching and they saw a rookie quarterback. Don't put that on Mike Evans, please. Just don't do it.
Well, and you touched on it, Brandon. There's just so many good receivers. I mean, it's just it's hard to keep up with all of them. I mean, it's very difficult to get the same recognition as an Odell Beckham. You know, nobody's going to do that. You've got Beckham, you've got Brown, you've got Julio. I mean, that's 3 right there off the board, and you're already at spot 4 before you get to a regular, you know, receiver or running back or whatever. So. And
by regular, we mean 1,000-yard seasons every year.
Right. Yeah.
The regular guys.
That's how far we've come. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think the problem with Dez is that, you know, I think people are still nervous about Tony Romo. I think until he gets on the field, people are going to be a little hesitant.
I'm always nervous about a player that owns a pet monkey at home, and it just gives me, you know, it just is nerve-wracking because, you know, you've got PETA on you and the monkeys get in trouble. Like, that's all that's on the radio here in Dallas is the pet monkey.
What do you have on you?
Really?
Well, if they're going to find a thing to complain about, it's going to be anything, I assure you. Dallas radio is not good. But
and it's early July, as we said. It's literally getting crazy.
Yeah, I mean.
Out of their minds.
Right. All right. Well, we are going to get into the top fantasy running backs in a minute. But before that, we're going to take a small break and be right back. All right, and we are back, and we are going to be talking about top fantasy running backs. Earlier today or this weekend, Todd Gurley made the very bold statement that people should draft him number 1. Although he did make an exception. He did correct himself with maybe Antonio Brown, maybe Cam Newton. But one thing is clear, he views himself as the top fantasy running back. So what do we think about that?
I think he hasn't been listening to the latest rap music because Le'Veon Bell... he's focused. Was that a shout out to us? I don't know, but he's a $14 million man according to him. And I think there is clearly the number one fantasy running back if he ends up being healthy this year. So, hey, Todd Gurley, hey, we can't blame him for wanting to take himself first. This is the classic Maurice Jones-Drew move right here. And many football players out there would do the same thing. Most of them don't deserve it. Gurley, he's definitely in that conversation. There's no doubt about it. But for me, not the number one. And I'm a little bit down on Todd Gurley compared to others. But I don't know what you guys think there.
Well, I think that you shouldn't be in the NFL if you don't think you're number one. So on that note, way to go, Todd Gurley.
Confidence rating is 99.
Yeah, well, I think that that's what you need to do to be in that kind of competitive work environment, and I get that. So at the same time, I think it's a slow news cycle, and some people, are going to blow it up. But me personally, my problem is not with Todd Gurley, but with the Los Angeles Rams in general. They have a rookie quarterback. They don't really have wide receiver options. Period. No offense, Tavon Austin and your trick plays, but it's a difficult offense for anyone to believe that they're going to do anything but hand Todd Gurley the ball. Now, Adrian Peterson has made a career out of that in Minnesota, right? Where everyone knew that they were going to give Adrian Peterson the ball, but he was able to do it. And if anyone could do it like Adrian Peterson, it's probably Todd Gurley. I just still feel like the team just doesn't have the support system that would make him the clear number one. And that's why I'm a little nervous personally. But I think he's a great talent. I guess, all those top guys have great talent. It's just about the supporting cast for me with all of them, frankly.
Right. And that's kind of where I was going to go with that, too, with Bell. I mean, obviously, athletically, they're all up there. That's why they're top running backs. But it's kind of like that rising tide lifts all boats saying. You've got the Pittsburgh offense, which for fantasy purposes might be the best, whether you quarterback, running back, receiver, even tight end this year. I think Ladarius Green's probably going to be a top 6 guy, and Le'Veon Bell. I mean, whether he's the cog in that thing or just a byproduct, either way, he's getting production out of it. And as long as he's healthy, that's the big worry for me with Bell. I mean, he's played 3 seasons. One of them he went 16 games, and look, he's coming off a pretty major injury. This wasn't a muscle contusion. This was a fairly serious injury. So, but it's been long enough now, and it appears all indications, and again, we've said it all episode, it's early, that he will be back and healthy. And I think at the moment, until he goes down again, he's got to be your top guy.
Yeah, and going to this Rams team, though, I mean, we should give credit where credit's due. They do have really, if there wasn't a guy named J.J. Watt, they have the best defensive player on the planet right now in Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
The defense is certainly going to keep them in games. They need defense when they go up against not San Francisco. Sorry, 49ers fans. It's coming. You got Chip now, so but going up against Arizona and Seattle, that's obviously a priority. But then you look to the offensive side of the ball. I don't know if they have receivers yet. I agree, Tavon Austin, gadget guy, not going to go over 500 yards receiving. Sure, you'll get oohs and ahs when you put his name on the draft board, but that sort of sexy pick doesn't really win you fantasy championships. And Kenny Britt, there will always be that magical moment when he destroyed my Philadelphia Eagles. I think he scored 4 touchdowns in that game. But other than that, he's just Kenny Britt. But Mike Thomas, look up the highlights. Not Michael Thomas, Mike Thomas. Look up the highlights last year. He had an Odell Beckham Jr. catch. Then, Pharaoh Cooper. I think this kid is Doug Baldwin 2.0. He's going to be a very strong asset out of the slot for this team. And let's not forget that they did draft Tyler Higbee, who is arguably the best receiving tight end in this class. So they realized they had a problem. They addressed that problem with some quality players. They got Mike Thomas at a steal this year. So we don't know yet if they have receivers. This is a situation much like Cleveland where they may be running with 2 rookies as starters. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Mike Thomas blows right by and gets in his starting job and Cooper works his way into a starting job. That wouldn't shock me in the least. I don't expect that, but in that right, I agree with you still, Brandon. It's a bad situation. Opposing defenses are going to know exactly what they're going to do, which means that there are going to be some big games. Todd Gurley's really talented. He's going to have games. We saw it last year where he just hits that hole and boom, he's gone 75 yards later, he's in the end zone. But then there are going to be some weeks where he has 15 carries for 45 yards. We've seen those games out of Peterson. For as good as Peterson has been, we've seen those kind of games, especially more recently in his career. So it's more of a roller coaster ride, and if you're looking at that from a consistency standpoint, one of the things that makes guys like Le'Veon Bell, guys like potentially David Johnson or Devontae Freeman last year so good for fantasy purposes is that maybe they didn't have the best day running the ball, but then they chipped in 6 catches for 62 yards and a score or something like that. It just means their floor is that much higher, and you're not going to get that with Gurley. That's where he is very similar to Peterson as well. You're probably going to max out at about 35 targets on the season, which, 3 targets per game, that's really not enough to raise his fantasy floor.
And I suggest getting player grades. We have them at Pro Football Focus. It's great. We have these great visuals of the line and everything, especially if you play fantasy. A lot of us aren't as invested in what's going on in the offensive line. Now, this is our job, so we are. But, I'm talking about the general community, not as invested. Check out the St. Louis offensive line's grades. It's all red, which, by the way, is, the worst ranking we can have, except for one guy in yellow, okay? Havenster. So, that's it. That's it. And that's my problem. He doesn't have it up front. And if he goes up against a really good defensive line, there's a problem. There's a huge problem. And he can't make that any better if he's going to get hit 2-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Even if he averages, let's say, 4 yards after contact, he still isn't even at the line of scrimmage. That's a problem.
Yeah, it definitely is a problem. I'm glad you brought those up. You can get those with the player grade product that we have at Pro Football Focus, but we also have the offensive line grades in our Draft Master tool, which if you haven't checked this thing out, it's pretty diesel. And you just go into Todd Gurley's player profile, and you want to see how the offensive line performed, and then you can compare that to Devontae Freeman, whoever. And I know I'm shamelessly plugging this right now, but I'm bluntly honest. You can get lost in this thing because there's so much information there. And Brandon, you're spot on here. We don't pay enough attention to offensive line play, and especially when it comes to running backs and quarterbacks as well. That's pretty darn important. So you can get that information with us, and you can't really get that anywhere else, especially as it relates to the individual players.
Exactly. Well said.
Put, Michael.
Hey, but real quick, so I know you mentioned 35 targets for Gurley. So, the fact that Jared Goff could check down 50 times in a season, does that have an effect on Gurley's targets, or that is with that in effect?
It would affect Benny Cunningham's targets.
Okay.
And I'm not joking. Benny Cunningham's going to be the passing down back. And, we saw it last year. Remember, early on in the year, there was essentially nobody. It was before Gurley returned. There was nobody on the roster except Benny Cunningham, and he was the passing down back. And we came out and said, start him in FanDuel and DraftKings, start him as DFS, because he's going to be a 3-down running back because they don't have anybody else. So you got the early down work and the passing down work. But then you look at last year, when Gurley was in the mix, Cunningham, he was the passing down back. So, and I don't expect those roles to change whatsoever. So, we project, I say 36. That might be a little low. Maybe it's closer to 40, but, give or take, round about that range is what I expect. Round about 3 targets a game for Gurley, and Cunningham's going to be in the mix as well. It's not a situation where he's a true 3-down guy. That's another reason why I'm a little bit lower on him than maybe consensus is right now. So concerns about the team, about how they're going to perform offensively with a rookie quarterback, no passing game, limited volume in terms of amount of plays per game, and then just the fact that he isn't David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, Devontae Freeman, Lamar Miller. These guys are all going to be 3-down guys. You're not going to necessarily see that with Gurley.
Well, and so that brings up another question. The three of us agree Le'Veon Bell we would take first overall, and it wouldn't be Todd Gurley. So besides those two players, which running back has the best shot to be the top fantasy running back this year? Brandon, you go first.
Well, I am a David Johnson believer, but I'm going to take a moment and talk about Devontae Freeman, because today was the day that marked that the running back coach, and, listen, it's a running back coach.
Preach it, Brandon.
Bobby Turner, congratulations. Your name is in the news. It is in the news. And he said that Freeman's going to get less touches. and that they are going to mix Tevin Coleman in. But I want to read this exactly. Free, which is what he's calling Freeman, let's just put that out there. Free had a good year, but I'm expecting an even better year. It can be even better with less carries or less catches because I'd obviously like Tevin more involved to keep Free fresher. Now, all of a sudden, he's like a running back 4. I don't know what happened, but everyone's really upset by this quote by this coach, and I get it. And it does, no one wants less opportunities. We always talk about opportunities equal points, and that is true. But in Freeman's case, he had crazy amount of touches. I just want to make sure that everyone's clear about how many touches he had. So he was 4th last season with 265 carries, and he only played in 15 games. And even if he had 100 less carries, okay, let's say that they did take the ball away from him there, he'd still be in the top 25 in carries. He only had 4.0 yards per carry, but that was because of his usage, and it was very clear what was going on with the play calling, and even Julio Jones had some issues. Kyle Shanahan's creativity was at about a 4 out of 10 once we got past week 6, and you just saw the drop-off in the offense in its entirety, and it is what it is. But here's the other thing is, he had the 3rd most targets out of all running backs, 92. The 3rd most catches, 73. He had some drops, but again, that's a little overdone. But his average depth per target was 2.8 yards. The other guys, like the Danny Woodheads and the Theo Riddicks and what have you, they have like 0.7 ADOTs. Okay, we're talking about a huge discrepancy here. And only David Johnson had a better average depth per target, and he only had 50 targets, less than 50 targets. Again, 92 targets for this guy. If his usage goes down even a little bit, he's still a running back 1, and he's going below all of the guys that we just listed. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the number 1 running back, but he's definitely someone that you should stay right where he is and stop listening to early July twisted words. I mean, they talk about him being better next year, and somehow we're saying he's not going to be good anymore. You gotta take the good with the bad and like let it go through. Get these guys in pads first. That's my thing.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing we have to note here, he already did it once. He did it last year.
Yeah.
We're just ignoring that, I guess. You know, and so a couple comments here. What happened to Kyle Shanahan's offense? Leonard Hankerson? No, I'm kidding. But that was when he disappeared.
Straight up answer.
Wasn't that when he disappeared? Hey, he made the proverbial shine. There was nothing there. He had a triangle offense basically. He had 3 players, and that was it. That's all he had to deal with. So, but you look at what Freeman did, and you mentioned that average depth of target. That's really a product of this guy being a good route runner. Go back and watch him play. He runs very good patterns, so that bodes positively. And yet, people just don't want. This happens with certain players. The general consensus just doesn't want to believe that player is as good as he is. And Freeman is darn good, and I'm going to stick by my ranking of him. I have him ranked as a top 5 guy, and I'm going to keep him as a top 5 guy, and I'm not worried about what some running backs coach says about this situation. Though when you look at it, who to me stands out as the other potential, it is who you mentioned, Brandon. It's David Johnson. The guy is an absolute stud. He's a spark score freak coming into the league. He wasn't who they wanted. If you watch that All or Nothing, which is fantastic on Amazon, they wanted Amir Abdullah, so it looks like things worked out for them. The Lions sniping them on draft day, but David Johnson has the complete package. He is, like Freeman, a really good receiver out of the backfield. In fact, comes from a receiving background, but has more size than Freeman. And really has great speed for his size. He's very similar profile-wise to C.J. Prosise, but entered the league as a much more polished runner than Prosise is entering the league this year. He has a complete package in a high-powered offense with a pretty darn good offensive line, and he's going to get the lion's share of carries. Chris Johnson's going to spell him. Andre Ellington will spell him. Nobody's a threat for David Johnson. He's an absolute stud bell cow, and of anybody, I think he's got the chance to possibly supplant Le'Veon Bell. Though for me, I'm placing all my chips on Le'Veon Bell for number 1 overall.
Well, and Brandon, back to Devontae real quick. A stat that I found interesting. So Devontae Freeman was the top fantasy running back last year in standard scoring. He had like 246 fantasy points. That's the lowest point total for a top fantasy running back ever since like Pro Football Focus has been going back, right? I mean, all the other top running backs are scoring 300. But I think it jives with exactly what you're saying, which is, look, he may not be the top guy again, but that's okay. If he still does what he did, like you said, Jeff, that's still top 5 production. That's not anything bad. I mean, he's going to get, some undue pressure because he was the top running back. But look, if you don't get him as the top running back and you get him as your, round 2 pick or late first round pick, that's okay. It's all relative in the end.
Yeah, you look at the way the league's trending, though, and that doesn't surprise me that the numbers are like that. Last year, only 7 running backs topped 1,000 yards. Only 1 running back topped 300 carries. It's just it's a league that's been trending more towards the pass-heavy offense. But eventually, there's ebbs and flows in the league, and eventually there are breaking points, and eventually things go back and forth. We may be seeing that even as early as this year. You hear talk out of the AFC West in particular, 2 teams, the Denver Broncos and the San Diego Chargers, are potentially going to be running a lot more 2-back sets with a fullback on the field, which to me, that's kind of sexy. That's like, 1995 sexy right there.
Yeah.
With a fullback on the field for both of them. And San Diego, the fullback was actually, he has a somewhat recognizable last name, but he was actually Melvin Gordon's fullback in college. His last name being Watt. This is interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if the league trends a little bit more towards that. We are seeing some things with some of these offenses. Tennessee, for example, trying to get this big back in here, along with DeMarco Murray. We're seeing some of these teams go for these bigger running backs, the power football. So that could be a way to combat the defenses, because now the defenses have had to sort of keep pace with the offenses, and so you're seeing a lot more speed linebackers. You're seeing guys who are small for weak side linebackers. Mark Barron playing weak side, Deion Buchanan playing weak side linebacker. This year we'll probably see some Sua Cravens at linebacker at times for the Redskins. These guys are really undersized, and when they go up against Derrick Henry, I mean, I tell you, I know who's going to win that battle. So it's always fascinating to see the changes, but for now, this is the current state of the league, and that means decreased running back production from the front end. And yeah, I'm like I said, I'm sticking by it. I love the guys who are going to touch the ball in both phases of the game.
By the way, do you guys know how many carries Derrick Henry had last year at Alabama? I was looking at
396.
Huh?
396.
395, 396. 396.
Yes.
In 15 games. That's insane. Like that made me cautious when it comes to Derrick Henry drafting him in fantasy drafts this year. But anyway, all right. Well, let's round this out. One more quick question. Both of you name a running back that could be a top fantasy running back, not drafted in the first round. So not the names you mentioned earlier, Jeff. Not Ezekiel. Not David Johnson, not Le'Veon, somebody that, like Devontae Freeman last year, kind of came out of left field and did it.
Okay, let's. I guess we can look. So, not as deep as Freeman, though, right?
No. I mean, look, the chances are going to be slim no matter who we talk about, but somebody that has that potential.
All right, I'm going to go with Mark Ingram. Right now being drafted as the 12th running back off the board, potent offense in New Orleans. So that he's going to be involved as a runner. Last year showed that he was capable as a receiver, and he could get, I think conservatively maybe around 50 targets, but it wouldn't shock me at all if he saw 70 targets. If he makes it through the season unscathed, because that's a big part of being the top running back overall, is playing 15 or 16 games. If he makes it through the season, though, with that offense, especially I think taking a step forward this year, he could be a guy like that where you get him in the 3rd round and he ends up being the top running back overall. He'd be my dark horse pick.
All right, Brandon, you're up.
All right. I got 2, but they're really deep. And that means do not reach for them because you said, Brandon talked about them on the podcast. I thought they were going to be the number 1 back. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if we're going to go really deep, a Devontae Freeman kind of deep, I'm going Isaiah Crowell and Wendell Smallwood.
Hey now.
I am. I'm sorry.
If the
Smallwood for number 1.
I'm saying I think that they could be top 5 guys that you don't have to draft until the end of the draft. And in my opinion, they have that potential. I believe that Isaiah Crowell is getting a lot of praise as well as Duke Johnson. And everyone's all into Duke Johnson, and I love Duke Johnson too. He's the Giovanni Bernard. But Jeremy Hill outscored Giovanni Bernard in all formats over the last 2 years, standard, PPR, you name it. Now, was it touchdown heavy? Yes. But so's Isaiah Crowell. Like, I just feel like there's a possibility of him being the Jeremy Hill. He may not be, but if you're talking about shots in the dark, he's one I would take. And as far as Wendell Smallwood's concerned, other than his kind of sad start with the Philadelphia fan base on Twitter, I would say that, you know, if Ryan Matthews is the guy, so I'm not saying anything about that. If something were to happen to Ryan Matthews, or if they just kind of start trending that way, I just think Smallwood has a possibility. I think Philadelphia needs to run. And again, you know, they're changing everything over there with their coaching staff, with the personnel, with everything. I think there's just a possibility for him to break through. If there was a random, I have my eyes on him.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of if Ryan Matthews will get injured or probably when with that, because that will happen. And look,
I'm trying not to be negative.
Try not to be a W. I get it.
Early July.
It is early July, so literally we can say anything, and we'll see if it sticks. So, I am a 49er fan, Jeff. So don't hate me on this, but. Look, I'm very optimistic on the Chip Kelly move, and look, he likes to run the ball, obviously. So, you know, Carlos Hyde, I mean, and I won't go maybe as far to say the top running back, but I'm hoping he has a bounce-back season. I mean, he is the man there. There is no doubt about it. Sean Drone will do the passing down duties, and that's fine. But, you know, as far as hopefully San Francisco, you know, turning up the tempo and running 70 plays a game, I hope Carlos Hyde's the main beneficiary from that. But, again, it's Blaine Gabbert handing the ball off, so. Who knows? It's just a big crapshoot.
Hot take, no Colin Kaepernick.
That's the no. Believe me, he's burned me too many times. And I've moved on from that. I'm not gonna let my heart get broken again, Jeff. But
you know what? As a fantasy player, though, I loved Colin Kaepernick because when he played bad defenses, he played well, and when he played good defenses, he played poorly. He was the most predictable fantasy starter of the season before he got pulled last year. Literally, go back and look at it. It's unbelievable.
He was, and then when he was bad, he was even more predictive that he was just going to be bad all the time. But,
yeah.
Blaine Gabbert, 18th in fantasy scoring as a starter last year.
Just saying.
Over that span of time.
Championship. That's all I'm saying. All right.
Championship.
There you go. Well, okay.
Hey now.
No one said that.
It's July. You can say whatever.
Yeah,
I was
whatever.
We'll shoot for 500. How about that? 8-8, and we'll call it a success. So
awesome.
All right, that will do it for this episode of the Fantasy Slant. I'm your host, Michael Moore, along with Brandon, Marianne Lee, and Jeff Ratcliffe. We will see you next time.